Today I'm going to show you the full disassembly process on the Meta Quest 3. You know, it's been almost a full year since we did the teardown of this the first time. I didn't really know much about the Quest 3. So when we did it on the live stream, I was just going in blind and I had no idea what to do with this. But now, almost a year later, I've repaired a little over 50 of these units, and I think it's safe to say I know a lot more now than I did then. So I just thought it'd be fun if we revisited this one, and I'd do another teardown video for you guys with all of the additional information on how to tear it down that I know now. Obviously, like any repair, we got to start by taking off our head strap and our facial foam, just leaving us with this bare unit here. I still think the design of these is really cool, but I have changed my opinions about some things. For one, speaker arm repair seems to be a really common thing. The speaker arms on the Quest 3 are way different than they are on the Quest 2. On the Quest 2, the speaker is kind of housed in this unit like this, and it sits inside the Quest 2. It's fixed from the inside, so it's really sturdy and secure. They do break, but they mostly break in this hollow portion out here. They don't usually break at the base. On the Quest 3, the speaker is placed a little bit further back in the speaker arm, and it doesn't have that same joint design that sits on the inside of the headset. Instead, they've replaced it with these little mounting rings, and these are pretty fragile. I have a collection of about 10 of these broken things. If there's anybody out there who's really good at 3D printing and designing, I would pay you handsomely for some of these. So most of the time when the speaker arm breaks off, it's not the speaker arm that's breaking, it's one of these little rings that's breaking on the inside, because there's just not much to them. This is a broken one that I kind of glued back together so I could show you what it's kind of supposed to look like, but you can see that the plastic's just kind of really flimsy. The other thing is that even though the charge port was redesigned, I do still get some charge port melt on these units. I've seen probably half a dozen units come through my shop that have charge port melt. So whatever flaw causes these to overheat and melt has carried over from the Quest 2. The other thing that I see that has kind of surprised me is that these are not nearly as durable as you'd think that they would be. The recessed camera design of the Quest 2 is actually a little bit more durable. For example, these cameras here, they don't really break at all. But these front 3 sensors here, I repair these quite a bit. You'd think that this plastic shield here would protect them, but that just doesn't seem to be the case, specifically with this sensor here. If this plastic gets hit hard enough to crack, then that sensor just goes. The other thing that's noteworthy is that this head strap retainer here is about as fragile as the head strap retainers on the Quest 2s. I've not seen that many of them yet, but I have seen broken ones. The problem is that you can't just replace this the way that you do with the head strap retainer on the Quest 2. This is part of the frame here. So in order for me to repair this, I have to replace this whole frame, which requires a full disassembly of the unit. One thing that I do like about the Quest 3 is this proximity sensor design, because unlike the proximity sensor on the Quest 2, this is not nearly as prone to liquid damage. This piece of plastic here just acts as a protective barrier. The proximity sensor is actually on the other side and not adhered to this at all, unlike on the Quest 2. So there seems to be no amount of sweat or liquid that is going to damage this proximity sensor. I mean, unless it's, fully submerged. The trade-off is that this rubber face gasket is much more fragile, and I see that these get torn a lot just through normal wear and tear. Sometimes I'll see rips on the outside or around the lenses, just where people were being a little careless with them for a brief second. The face shields on the Quest 2 don't have that same problem because they're a hard plastic. They do crack sometimes, but that seems to be exceedingly rare. However, again, this proximity sensor, just super prone to liquid damage, even from just sweat or moisture coming off your face in the headset. I do like the IPD adjuster on the Quest 3 better than the IPD adjuster on the Quest 2. These aren't as prone to failure as I thought that they would be. The Valve Index and some of the HTC models, they have a slide adjuster as opposed to something that clicks into place. And those gear mechanisms seem to wear out or get out of place over time, causing issues, but I've not seen that problem with the Quest 3 yet. Also, I'm a big fan of these lenses. They seem more durable than the Quest 2 lenses, but at the same time, because of the material that they're made out of, they seem much more resistant to my buffing polishing process that I use with the Quest 2. So they're not nearly as easy to replace or nearly as easy to repair. So anybody who's looking at getting one of these or has one of these, I would recommend some plastic covers just to ensure that your glasses don't scratch them or you don't scratch them incidentally. So without further ado, we're just going to tear this down. I'm a big fan of my metal pry tool here, and this is going to help us take this rubber face gasket off. I'm going to start on the outsides here and pop this out. So when we pop it up on the side, it should look like this. Do it again on this side, just like that. And then we're just going to kind of work our way around. On the bottom here, we almost have to go in to unlatch that, and then we'll come back around this other way. Most of these should clip out pretty easily, except for the ones at the top and the bottom. So on the top here, I'm going to work my spudger in. And I'm going to pop that away. And then before I start to tear this away, I need to remove this from around the eyes. So I'm going to get my pry tool here in the seam, gently work my way around. Same thing on that side. Okay. And now there's one more clip on the inside, kind of at the bridge of the nose. I'm just going to stick my finger in there and I'm going to gently pop that out. And that whole face gasket just kind of comes out. Next, I'm going to take these rings off. If I'm just doing something on the front of the headset, I don't usually worry about these. But if I want to take the LCDs all the way out, I need to take these off because they won't fit through this frame unless they're out. So we're going to go ahead and pop those out. I'm going to start at the top corner here, and there's a little clip just right there. Pop that out. And that just comes out. And then number 2. Now we got a lot of screws going on the inside, but there's only 7 that I really need to worry about. I've got this one here in this top corner. This one here. There's one right there you can see poking through with the white. This one at the nose, and then these 3 opposing screws on the other side. You can tell which ones hold the front plate in because a little bit of white shows, except for this one at the nose here. Any of the other screws, we're not going to worry about them just quite yet. Alright, now I've gotten all those screws out that hold the faceplate in. So the ribbons for the cameras and the sensors are all at the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently lift up from the bottom. You see how they kind of tuck in here at the base? We're just going to make sure that these aren't tucked in here any tighter than they have to be. Because what we're going to do is we're going to unclip this at the top. There's a couple clips up here. I'm just going to put my pry tool here at the top, and we're going to clip that. And then unclip it on the other side. Cool. And then this will just lift down like this. Perfect. The next thing on our agenda is this Bluetooth antenna and this retaining bar that it's attached to. So I've got a handful of screws here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws that hold that in. 3 longer screws and then the 4 short screws at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and take those out. One thing to look out for on the Quest 3 is, unlike the Quest 2, almost all of the screws in the Quest 3 are non-ferrous. So I personally have to use tweezers for almost every single screw that I take out so they don't just fall all over the place. And even then, sometimes they just fall all over the place because they're tiny. So make sure you're doing this in a place where if you drop a screw, you're not going to lose it forever. A nice work surface with a non-carpeted floor is ideal. So now I've got all those screws out. The way that I'm going to detach the Bluetooth antenna is I'm just going to pull straight back very gently, and that just all comes off in one piece. Now I'm going to carefully unattach these ribbons that connect to the front cameras and sensors. This one has a little bit of adhesive on it, so we got to be careful with this one. We're going to unattach it first, and then I'm going to take my pry tool and I'm going to run it behind that ribbon to sever that adhesive. and the whole faceplate should just come out like that. Now if you're watching this video because you want to replace one of these cameras, these retainers just hold down the cameras, and then the cameras are independently screwed in. So I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like real quick. And then these just kind of lift up and away. There we go. There's a little bit of thermal paste there, kind of keeps the cameras cool, and I suppose pads them a little bit to some extent. But you can see that each of these is just independently screwed in there. Now there are some caveats here. This depth sensor on the front is just glued down. So you can't unscrew that, but you can take a heat gun and a pry tool to it and pull that away if your repair calls for that. I'm going to set this off to the side for now so that we can focus on the meat and potatoes. This white plastic component functions as a retainer for the heat sink and the fan. So that's got to come out next. There's 4 screws that hold that in. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's kind of hooked underneath this component here. So we're just going to lift that out from the bottom and then pull down. Next we'll take our fan out. I'm going to go ahead and unplug this fan. And then there's 3 screws that hold it in, 1, 2, and 3. Perfect. So now my fan can just come out like that. And then we're left with this. All the ribbons and cables need to come off so we can take out this motherboard. So we'll do that next. Be careful with these speaker wires. They are hooked in right here. I gotta unhook that before I pull it out. We'll just pull that straight back. And then this speaker wire is held in over here. Perfect. Cool. Now all my ribbons and cables are undone, so we can take out the screws that hold in the board. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws that hold in the board. Once those screws are out, the motherboard just kind of lifts out. Cool beans, just like that. And then just like the Quest 2s, I can tell what storage size is on the board because it says 512 gigs right there. Looks like Meta finally did away with the Oculus logo and replaced it with their Meta logo. All the boards for the Quest 2, regardless of whether or not they're Oculus or Meta, still had the Oculus logo on them, but not with the Quest 3. If I want to access the battery, I need to take off this aluminum shield here. There's a couple screws that hold that in. I've got 2 at the base and then 2 on the sides here. 1 and then 2. One thing to be aware of is this cable here. It's adhered to the aluminum, so I need to separate that. I have a little chisel that I like for adhesion separation, but any sharp tool that's not going to cut the ribbon should work. And then that shield's just kind of pops out of there. And now our battery's exposed, and it's held in with 4 screws as well, 2 on the side here, and then these 2 hex screws at the top. This 3.0 hex bit should do the trick. Alright, and now that battery will just lift right on up out of there. Next, this white frame needs to come off. And there's a couple things to look out for here. Namely, this ribbon down here is screwed into the LCD assembly frame. So I need to unscrew that. And then I also need to start undoing the screws from the inside as well, because these 2 screws hold in the frame right down there. And then I've got 2 screws up here. The other thing is this Wi-Fi antenna is seated along these grooves here. And so we need to pull that out so that it will actually come up. One last thing is that this audio jack cable hooks into this ribbon latch here, so we're just going to pop that. And then this whole frame should just kind of pop out. You do need to do it top to bottom because the IPD adjustment wheel kind of holds everything in. There we go. Cool. Now there's a handful of screws we need to take out this LCD assembly here. I've got 6 on the front, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then I've got 4 on the inside, these 2 in the corners here, and then these 2 at the nose. Then our LCD panel just kind of comes out. Now that we've got this assembly fully out of the headset, we can see that it just kind of glides along this rail here. And in order to remove these panels with the lenses, we just have to take out a couple brackets. So I've got these 2 brackets at the bottom that hold it here, and then this bracket at the top that holds it up here. These screws here can be kind of hard to reach, but as long as you just kind of go all the way in with the IPD and then all the way out with the IPD, you should be able to access them. And then I've got 4 little brackets on the back here that hold this rod in. And now these panels just kind of pop off. And just look at all those screws. And then you can get a better idea of how this IPD adjuster works. Pretty cool. One of my big complaints on the Quest 2 was that it was just one panel. And if the ribbon on that panel went bad or there was some sort of damage, you'd lose the image in one eye or both eyes depending on the severity of the damage. And the Quest 3 kind of fixes this by having 2 different panels. And also by having cables that plug in directly to the LCD display rather than being directly soldered in. I'm not going to tear these down any further because if I was going to do an LCD replacement on a unit, I would just use this full component here just as is. And then at long last, we're down to the speaker arms here. So the speaker arm on the charge port side and then the speaker arm on the audio side, they come out the same way. There's a little bracket here that's kind of glued to the charge port, so we got to take that out. And then the speaker wire kind of runs up underneath it, runs out through that hole. And then there's 3 screws on the inside here that hold that mounting ring in. So we'll go ahead and take all that out. Cool. And you can see how that speaker wire just kind of comes out there. And then we'll go ahead and take these 3 screws out here. They're a little hard to reach, but not impossible. Just with a normal screwdriver, I don't find myself needing any adapters or anything. All right, and now that I've unscrewed that, this speaker arm just kind of comes out. Just feed that cable through there, and that just pops out like that. And then you can see what I mean by these O-rings and how flimsy they are. If I press down on this, I can push that out. And that's really all there is to it. So you can see that plastic there is not super reinforced and it's not super thick. So it's pretty obvious as to why it would break all the time and why just a little bit of leverage in the wrong direction would just crack this plastic and cause those speaker arm failures that have become very common. And now we'll do the same thing to the other side here. Gotta get that speaker wire free. And that just comes out like that. And then for some reason, I'm not an engineer, but these ones just seem to be a little bit more resilient than the charge port side. I don't see these break nearly as much. So whatever Meta did on this side, I wish they would do on the other side for you know, future models. And that pretty much takes it down to the frame, which doesn't have much going on. We've got our proximity sensor here that's kind of glued to the top and then comes around the side to plug into the motherboard. But other than that, we're pretty much done. I've got my speaker arms, I've got this outer white shell frame, got my face gasket, my main frame, motherboard's over here. There's our fan, our charge port, our audio port. We've got our 2 LCDs, got our little eye rings, and then we've got a couple aluminum components. And then hiding over here off camera, we've got the front plate with the sensors still in it. Oh, and battery. One more note here about this particular component. These cameras can come out, but again, I've not seen these break yet. So I suppose if you needed to replace these cameras because they got broken or the headset got dropped, you could just take these brackets off and unscrew here. But all the other components along here are glued into this shell. So, and then some things like the volume button, you know, I get lots of questions about the volume buttons and the microphones. You can actually see that these are kind of plastic welded in here. So these don't really come up. I can take a chisel or a tool and I can, you know, yank these up, but I'm really just taking the tops off of them, and then I've got to put something else down like glue or a little bit of liquid plastic in order to reseat those. So that's a bit of a job. Not something I would recommend doing if you can avoid it. But again, I've not seen too many issues with the power buttons or the volume buttons and microphones on these particular units. That seems to be something that's only exists in the Quest 2 so far. Alright guys, well, that's pretty much all I got for you today. I appreciate you hanging out with me and watching this full video. I hope you guys learned something. I feel like I've definitely learned a lot in the 10 months that we've been doing these Quest 3 repairs. We've come a long way in our ability to repair these units and of course tear them down. If you need any of these components, if you need parts for your repair or you have questions about MetaQuest 3 repairs, feel free to reach out to us. We have most of these parts and components on our website. But if there's something up there that you really need that you don't see, you know, one of the brackets or a screw or something, you know, some peripheral component that we just haven't bothered to put up because there's no demand for it, just reach out to us, let us know, and we'll get that up on the website for you. As always, if you guys get a chance to like and subscribe to our channel, it really helps us out. We're doing our best to grow this channel so that we can keep providing you guys with more information on how to repair and restore your VR headsets. But that's all I got for you today. We will see you guys on the next one.